Welcome to this explainer. Okay, so today we're going to dive into this fascinating journey of how a government actually manages its money to, well, shape society. We constantly hear the word budget thrown around on the news, right? And usually it's accompanied by a ton of jargon and these super complex charts. But at its absolute core, a national budget isn't just math. It's really a master blueprint for a country's entire future. Which brings us to a really huge question. How exactly does a country decide where its money goes? It's kind of mind-boggling when you think about it. Today, we're going to explore exactly how budgets evolve from basic, everyday accounting rules into these incredibly powerful tools for equality and citizen empowerment. Because it's not just about balancing checkbooks, right? It's about allocating resources to reflect our actual shared values. Here's our quick roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start with the annual financial statement, look at the three main types of budgets, check out some innovative budgeting methods, dive into India's gender budget, and then wrap the whole thing up with citizen-led digital budgeting. All right, Section 1, the annual financial statement, which forms our constitutional base. Let's kick things off with a quick look at the absolute foundation of public finance. Obviously, every functioning government needs money to survive and serve its people. Now, under Article 112 of the Indian Constitution, there's a strict rule. The government absolutely must present an annual financial statement to Parliament. And this, folks, is what we commonly just call the budget. It basically maps out all the estimated receipts, so the money coming in, and the expenditures, the money going out, for the entire financial year, which runs from April 1st to March 31st. This single document pays for literally everything. We're talking officer salaries, pensions, building new roads, schools, hospitals, and running all those vital welfare schemes. Now, when the big budget speech is actually delivered, the document is split really cleanly into two distinct sections. You've got Part A, which is sort of the macroeconomic heart of the whole thing. This is where all the exciting announcements happen, right? The launch of new welfare schemes, the massive allocations for defense, education, healthcare, all of that. Then you have Part B, which tackles the funding side of the equation. It deals with the finance bill, which contains all the taxation proposals, stuff like income tax revisions and indirect taxes. So, put simply, Part A is how the government plans to spend the cash, and Part B is how it plans to raise it. Digging just a little bit deeper into the structure, we also see a really fundamental split between two types of accounts. First up, we have the capital account. This one deals with long-term investments. Think of this as capital receipts and expenditures, so things like building a massive new dam or acquiring major assets. Then we have the revenue account, which is all about the daily operational finances. This includes those tax receipts that roll in every single month and the routine expenditures they pay for, like a government doctor's salary. It's basically the difference between buying a house and just paying your monthly electricity bill. Moving right along to Section 2, three types of budgets and balancing the books. So a really crucial point here is understanding the fundamental math of balancing the national books. Because depending on how those final numbers shake out, a government will find itself in one of three scenarios. In a balanced budget, the expenses perfectly equal the revenue. Kind of the ideal state, right? Then, in a surplus budget, the revenue is actually greater than the expenses. This shows incredible financial soundness and is actually super useful for fighting high inflation. But then, we have the deficit budget, where the expenses outright surpass the revenue. Now, what's really fascinating here is the massive philosophical debate surrounding that deficit. Conventional economists tend to look at a national budget a lot like a strict household budget. They argue that a deficit means you're spending beyond your means, which could severely impact the financial health of the whole economy. But modern economists look at it totally differently. They actually vouch for the usefulness of a deficit budget. They argue that a government deficit can act like a really powerful engine to stimulate economic growth, basically injecting much-needed capital right into the market during slow periods. It's an absolutely fascinating divide on how money should be managed at the highest level. All right, let's jump to Section 3, innovative budgeting methods, or as I like to call it, smart budgeting. Okay, so what if a budget didn't just passively track spending, but actively tracked actual physical progress? You see, budgeting isn't some static rulebook. It constantly evolves as society demands better accountability. Just look at this timeline. It really highlights how we've adopted smarter, more outcome-driven ways to allocate resources. Back in 1924, the zero-based concept was born in the UK. Then by 1983, India's Department of Science and Technology introduced that same concept domestically. Fast forward a bit to 2001, and we saw the birth of participatory budgeting over in Bengaluru. And then in 2005, major modern frameworks like outcome and gender budgets were officially launched. Let's take a closer look at zero-based budgeting because it's a real game changer. In traditional budgeting, departments will often just take last year's budget, lazily add maybe 5%, and call it a day. Well, zero-based budgeting violently disrupts that habit. It evaluates all expenses from absolute scratch every single cycle. Instead of just bumping up last year's numbers, it forces every single department to justify their very existence and their costs from zero. So it's this highly analytical, project-oriented method that basically ensures no money is wasted on outdated legacy programs. Pretty smart, right? We also started shifting from just tracking the money to tracking actual reality. Let's compare outcome and performance budgets for a second. The outcome budget, which was introduced in 2005, measures progress in terms of physical units. So for the Ministry of Road Transport, it doesn't just ask, hey, did you spend the money? No, it asks, how many kilometers of highway were actually built? Meanwhile, the performance budget focuses heavily on efficiency. It measures how a scheme performed in the last fiscal year and then uses that exact data to manage future financial resources. It's essentially asking, okay, but how well did we actually spend the money? Now for Section 4, India's gender budget and achieving equality. I want to slow down the pace just a little bit here because this next innovation fundamentally shifts national priorities toward achieving real equality. Consider this. Women make up 48% of India's population. That's almost half the country. Yet, historically speaking, women have lagged significantly behind men on a lot of really critical social indicators, like health, education, and economic opportunities. So, the crucial takeaway here is that a generic, neutral budget doesn't actually fix deeply rooted inequality. The rationale is quite simple, but honestly, it's profound. National budgets impact men and women very differently, based entirely on how resources are allocated. Think about it. If you only fund heavy industry and completely ignore maternal health, your budget is structurally biased, even if it doesn't explicitly say so. Enter the gender budget, which was introduced in India during the 2005-2006 financial year to bring a much-needed gender perspective to absolutely all levels of the budgetary process. And India's gender budget is structured brilliantly. It's divided into two highly actionable parts, which ensures development benefits actually reach women and girls through specific, targeted schemes. Part A includes schemes that have 100% allocation strictly for women. So we're talking about things like widow pension schemes, girls' hostels, and maternity benefits. Then Part B includes broader schemes that allocate at least 30% of their total funds specifically to women. And this covers massive nationwide initiatives like midday meal programs and major rural development projects. Just take a look at the distribution of these funds in the 2022-2023 budget. While Part A is roughly 26,000 crore rupees, Part B is a staggering 1,44,000 crore rupees. That's a massive 84% share just for Part B. And what this really shows us is how deeply gender mainstreaming is now integrated into broader, everyday government programs. It's not just isolating women's issues into tiny niche projects anymore. It's literally forcing massive national infrastructure and welfare programs to dedicate at least a third of their financial power to women. And the growth here has just been phenomenal. As you can see, this represents a massive six-fold increase over just 16 years, going from roughly 24,000 crore at its inception all the way to over 143,000 crore in 2020-21. To put that into perspective, this isn't just some clever accounting trick. It's a reflection of a sincere effort to actually reach those gender equality goals. And even more importantly, it acts as a vital data tool. Civil society organizations and activists use these exact specific numbers to hold the government accountable, ensuring the money actually goes exactly where it's promised. Finally, Section 5, Citizen-Led Digital Budgeting and Citizen Participation. Let's wrap up by exploring how the true power of budgeting is finally being handed directly back to you, the taxpayer. Imagine actually deciding exactly where your tax rupees go in your own city. Do you want the money spent on fixing those annoying local potholes, or maybe building a brand new park for your neighborhood? Well, that's the democratic power of participatory budgeting. It's a system where ordinary community members directly decide how to spend a chunk of a public budget. This was pioneered in Bengaluru way back in 2001 by Jana Agraha, and later took really firm roots in Pune. It's a method that involves everyday citizens throughout the entire budget cycle, completely democratizing the whole process. And now, digital technologies are really championing this kind of citizen participation to control governmental activities. E-budgeting platforms are creating this widespread movement of activists and ordinary citizens who can finally use digital tools directly within public decision-making procedures. Think about it. You don't have to be some political insider anymore. The data's online, the forums are super accessible, and your actual voice can translate directly into a line item on a government spreadsheet. It's pretty amazing. It's such an empowering thought to end on, don't you think? Today we've seen how budgets have evolved from this sort of cold constitutional math into really vital tools for social equality and direct citizen power. So the next time you hear about the national budget on the news, try to remember all the fascinating mechanisms underneath that actually drive change. Let me leave you with this. If you could use participatory digital budgeting for your own city right now, exactly where would you allocate the resources? Think about it. Thanks so much for joining this explainer, and keep asking the big questions.